Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're going to be talking about the heading indicator. We're going to be talking about why it works, how it works, and some added things along the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so here we have our steam gauge heading indicator, and inside you can see the inner workings, which we'll get into very soon. So you might be wondering, what is a heading indicator? What does it do? And why is it important to me? Well, if you want to know the direction you're going, it's pretty helpful, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, it's not required equipment for a VFR day or night flight if you take a look at your atomator flames/flaps. That's also known as your Reg 91205, which is very important, so make sure that you memorize that for your check ride. But if your check instructor or your DPE asks, why is it not required? It's because you have your mag compass. But the reason why we have our heading indicator is because it makes our lives a heck of a lot easier maintaining our heading compared to using that mag compass, because we have things like mag compass errors, if you've heard of VD-MONA, and ease, like card rotation reversal, but we won't get into that in this video. So let's start with, what is a heading indicator? Well, a heading indicator is in the name. It indicates the heading that you're currently on and helps you easily determine what heading you want to get to. Pretty simple. So let's dive into the inner workings of this steam gauge heading indicator. Now, it typically looks like this when you're flying a six-pack, or in other words, steam gauge. So let's first get into the face of the heading indicator right here. Now, each of these numbers and tick marks indicate the direction of a heading. Each tick mark is indicated in 5 and 10 degree increments. So this heading right here would be 010, that longer tick mark here. This would be 020, 030, and so on. And then if we're using these smaller tick marks up here, this first smaller tick mark would be 005, this would be 15, this would be 25, and so on. So now if you see this little airplane right here, this orange airplane, that indicates the heading that you're currently on. So if you see how the nose is aligned with a northerly heading right now, that indicates that you're flying north. So now if you want to get to, let's say, a 060 heading right here, then we would turn to the right to get to a 060. Pretty simple, right? So now let's dive into the inner workings of our instrument, shall we? So inside our steam gauge heading indicator, we have a gyro. If you see this little disc right here, we have gimbals surrounding it, these little rings. We have a main drive gear up here, another gear between the main gear and the compass card gear, which the compass card gear is right here. And you can see that little arrow there. And down below we have an adjustment knob and adjustment gears. So I'll talk about what all of these mean together. So first we have our gyro, which is upright and spinning, ideally. And this gyro will never move. It's going to remain in a fixed position, and we'll talk about its behavior in a little bit. So we have our gyro right here that's fixed, upright, spinning. Our gimbals allow the aircraft to move around the gyro rotor, and the gimbals are mounted inside the surface of the heading indicator. So as our aircraft moves, our gimbals move, and in turn move the drive gear, which then move the compass card gear. So when we're turning, our heading indicator will turn as well. So in summary, the gyro remains in a fixed position, upright and spinning ideally. The gimbals move around as our aircraft moves around. The main drive gear transmits that information to our compass card gear and moves the face of the heading indicator to indicate what heading we're currently moving toward or currently on. Now, if our heading indicator needs to be fixed or realigned, then in the cockpit, you're going to see this little knob here, this adjustment knob. So what you're going to do is you're going to push that in, and you can twist it left or right to realign your heading indicator properly. These adjustment gears will move the face of your heading indicator, and once your heading is fixed, you just release the adjustment knob and you're good to go. So now you might be wondering, how does this work and how is this powered? Well, just like the steam gauge attitude indicator, our steam gauge heading indicator is vacuum powered, which means our engine needs to be up and running properly in order for those vacs to apply adequate suction. And for assessments, it's around 4.5 to 5.5 inches of mercury, but you can look that up in your aircraft's POH. But so long as your suction gauge is in the green, you're good. The beauty of a lot of our instruments is we focus on those gauges being in the green to minimize task saturation. So instead of looking at numbers, we see green, and we're good to go. So once there's adequate suction and those gyros are spinning adequately, it works. Why? Well, most people understand this concept best considering the gyro to be as if it's like a bike wheel. When you're pedaling slowly, your wheels feel wobbly, but once they're spinning quickly enough, you're resistant to outside forces enough for the wheels to continue spinning in the right direction and are resistant to those outside forces that were making the bike wheel wobbly in the first place. This is known as rigidity in space. The same concept applies here, except this gyro is able to maintain its position in space for your selected heading. Now, the heading indicator only picks up on when and how much you're turning. It's like a dum-dum instrument, the official term. So you need to set it first so it can measure from where you were to where you are now. That's why it's so important, and this is on your checklist, to set the heading indicator to the mag compass before takeoff to get an accurate reading. So now you might be wondering, are there any errors to this heading indicator? Well, I'm glad you asked, because yes, there are. The heading indicator deviates every 15 minutes or so you use your adjustment knob to realign your card to match the mag compass, and it doesn't account for your ground track, or essentially the heading you're flying with winds pushing you. So if your flight instructor or your DPE or check instructor asks, why do we need to adjust the heading indicator every 15 minutes? Well, this is due to precession. These gimbals and gears move, so with that movement, they're subject to friction, which causes your heading indicator to drift from its original position. Another is caused by the rotation of the Earth. The Earth rotates about 15 degrees per hour, depending on where you are on the Earth. So your original heading is subject to change after an hour due to the Earth's rotation on top of the friction our gimbals and gears experience. And from my experience, I can promise you almost every single time, every 15 minutes, your heading indicator is going to deviate from your mag compass heading due to these factors. So next time you're in the air and using a steam gauge heading indicator, take a look. Now, one thing my student pilots tend to forget because they rarely do it this way, but it's important to know, is to be sure to reset the heading indicator to the mag compass only when you're in straight and level flight. If you look at the mag compass errors, you'll know that if you're climbing or descending, it won't read accurately in these phases of flight. And I'll give you a second to think about which mag compass errors are going to be affected by climbing or descending, or even experiencing a little bit of turbulence. If you said oscillation and acceleration/deceleration errors, good job. So only set your heading indicator in straight and level flight. But if you're flying with something more expensive in the avionics department, like a G5 or G1000 for instance, then you'll have something that looks like this. This is called an HSI, or situation indicator. So how's this different? Well, for one, an HSI incorporates not only a heading indicator, but this little line right here, which is called a CDI, or course deviation indicator, which we won't get into today, but it's mostly for instrument flying and it tells you how to stay aligned with your course. Our heading indicator differs in terms of how it works too. It gets its information from the magnetometer in the left wing, and this is to prevent any interference from the avionics in the cockpit and the flap motor, which is located on the right. But this is just for our Cessna, so if you're flying something different, be sure to verify where your magnetometer and your flap motor would be located for your aircraft. So what does this magnetometer do? The magnetometer senses the Earth's line of magnetic flux, and there are lines of magnetic flux throughout the entire Earth that behave similarly to a bar magnet. Due to these lines of flux, it can help us indicate where we are located on the Earth. And fun fact, birds also have a type of magnetometer located in their upper beaks that measure the intensity and inclination of the Earth's magnetic field, which is how they know where to fly south for winter. Anyway, in oversimplified terms, the magnetometer then sends its raw data to the AHRS, which is the Attitude and Heading Reference System, which then processes this information, combining with GPS and inertial data to calculate the final magnetic heading, and routes all of this information to the PFD for the primary flight display that looks a little something like this. And the PFD is simply the display you see here. It's in the name, it's just a flight display. This means that the primary difference between your digital heading indicator and the steam gauge heading indicator is that your digital heading indicator does not have these deviation errors, so you do not need to readjust your heading card every 15 minutes, and it's also electrically powered, not vacuum powered, so you don't need to worry about having a suction gauge. And now for some final added comparisons. Regarding your heading, if you're on a cross-country flight plan or simply trying to maintain a heading, you'll think about wind correction, isogonic lines, and magnetic deviation to maintain that heading, or essentially the course heading. Versus with the G5 or G1000, it updates winds and magnetic deviation real time, so you can fly your true course when the wind diamond is placed under your desired heading. And finally, a little tip: if ATC gives you a heading, they've already corrected for winds before giving you that heading to follow. So it must be an indicated heading that you must fly with the G5 or G1000. So do not use your wind diamond, even if you have it. And that's it. Alright, so that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you found it useful, informative, entertaining, etc. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up so I know that you appreciate it. It helps me a lot. And thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next video.